it was really important to try and benchmark us across to other jurisdictions, and so that's why we've been willing to take part in this survey so that we can compare ourselves with other areas. And the overall picture is actually pretty good.
Is it right to compare the Isle of Man's roads with that of the UK, because they are just in essence so very different?
Whether it's the UK or whether it's other jurisdictions, that's absolutely fine, because otherwise I think you operate in a bubble, and you can't actually see the same pressures that other jurisdictions have, we have, and we might have a certain view, but it's actually interesting to see how other people respond, and that's what was really key. And particularly some of the pressures are very similar, particularly for public transport, for example.
We talk at sort of start a bit broader, I suppose, with the overall satisfaction on the island for its highway stands at 57%. Now, that is above the UK average of 53%, but that's still only 57%. Should we take that with a pinch of salt?
Well, what it says is it's better, and I think the key things that really came out are the fact that which in some ways it won't be a surprise, but highway maintenance is a big issue, a massive issue. It's okay, it may be marginally better than the UK, but actually still says to me that we've got a lot of work to do in that area. And from the mid-2000s, there's a massive drop in maintenance budgets, which takes the trouble with maintenance budgets. They have a long lag, and it actually takes a number of years before that actually is demonstrated. And actually, the other way around is to actually fix it is actually going to take a long time to actually resolve, those maintenance issues. But that's why it was really important to get the additional revenue budget increased halfway to what it was before, but at least it's halfway, and that will improve the amount of resources we have to actually fix roads and maintain them, but also put them in a condition so that they don't fail in the first place.
Talking on your resources, I suppose, always a strain. There is also in this survey a demand. Also in this survey, there's a demand for a bigger demand or bigger concentration on highway maintenance for both walking and cycling. Now, when you talk about highway maintenance, which I suppose is probably potholes and things like that, how do you balance where your concentration goes? Because we've obviously talked about the link between Douglas and Onken for cycling and walkers recently.
Yeah, so, I mean, in essence, there was a really massive good news story, if I may, first, was on public transport, because they've gone through massive change in the UK, and to be fair, it's actually gone not that well, whereas in the Isle of Man, we've actually the second highest in satisfaction, whereas maintenance is really low. And what was interesting, particularly on walking and cycling, were the figures were really quite. We were 113th out of 115, so and it's below 50%. And that means we've got a lot of work to do. But
was
fortunately,
that a surprise?
It was a bit of a surprise, but it actually does highlight some of the feedback and some of the work that we're doing. And in essence, it actually sort of reinforced some of the work that we are doing with active travel to get people more walking and cycling. So in some ways, it really supports that initiative, because actually at the end of the day, it is a difficult balance. Most of the time, we have to try and maintain the highway. But we do also need to try and improve things for people walking and cycling.
We've talked about the active travel initiative, trying to get people potential very early plans, as we said, about a link between Douglas and Onken for walking, cycling, generally being active. What about the rest of the island? There's a lot of concentration, especially with the regeneration scheme on the prom, about getting Douglas up to scratch. But of course, this is an overall island satisfaction survey.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key areas. But in terms of the active travel strategy, it was about getting a higher percentage across the island. So obviously you're going to concentrate where most people are, and most people can walk and cycle within 2 or 3 miles. But absolutely, all the other areas are covered because we're looking at improving links between schools and centres. So yes, all of the island will be covered in the strategy to help people to walk and cycle. And also, it's very much about a changing of ethos in terms of how we do our maintenance, and how we've already got people to improve our designing and also training and how we actually are what we call the Manx manual for roads. So that's important as well.
What is your main focus of maintenance at the moment then?
Well, I think what we've started to see was an increase this year. There's a number of schemes. A lot of those will be a simple, what we call a plane and overlay. So that means taking the top surface and repairing that, where more fundamental work of reconstructing the whole road as the prom. So you will start to see some of those. But I think, as I said earlier, there's probably £80 million worth of investment needed on the Islands Road. So these are sort of steps, but there's a long way to go.
Do you find that's emphasised or exacerbated slightly in the cold weather? Because of course we've got ice warnings at the moment, and it's notorious for breaking up road.
Yes, I mean the weather will break up road, and if the roads have not been, they actually need to go through a set maintenance plan with when you reconstruct, you surface dress, you plane and overlay, and so forth. So there's an element of that because that investment hadn't happened in the past. The roads are more likely to break up. Having said that, when you get contraction and you get expansion through ice, roads will naturally fail in places, and you will get problems, particularly this time of year, and with storms and with ice and then rain and so forth.
How much would a survey like this play a role in your, I suppose, pitch to the budget coming up in March?
Well, not only this, I suppose it will really be for the following budget. Because obviously this budget is very much sort of set, but for forthcoming budgets, it does actually play it's a really important role, a really important piece of evidence to actually say, there's actually more that we can do in highway maintenance. It is a big issue, and it's something that it actually saves money in the long run. So it is an important a piece that we take forward, as well as and the things where we need to change and where we need to support. So it's very important that we keep investing in our public transport. It obviously, is working well. So those are sort of the key messages I've taken.